Welcome to Watching Comics with me, Chris Otto, where I share my thoughts and opinions on comic book movies and television shows. And on this week's episode of Watching Comics, I'll be talking about the Dark Knight Trilogy. For those of you who don't know, the Dark Knight Trilogy refers to the trilogy of films directed by Chris Nolan and starring Christian Bale as Batman. Batman Begins, released in 2005, The Dark Knight, released in 2008, and The Dark Knight Rises, released in 2012. Now, this is a topic I've been looking forward to discussing on this podcast, because I've had so many discussions about these three films online, the effect that these films had on the comic book movie world, that I couldn't wait to share my opinions once again with anyone who would listen. Starting with Batman Begins, like I mentioned in the first episode of this podcast, I consider Batman Begins one of my all-time favorite comic book films. You know, I'm a huge Batman fan, so this is my favorite Batman film, which, since we're talking about the Dark Knight Trilogy, may surprise some people, considering most people consider The Dark Knight as the best movie in the trilogy, the best Batman film ever, best comic book film ever, best movie ever. I'll get to The Dark Knight in a second, but like I said, I want to start with Batman Begins. I don't want to repeat myself too much, but there's a lot of things I do like about Batman Begins. You know, the one thing that bugs me is that they pronounce Ra's al Ghul incorrectly. Other than that, I think it's a really good Batman film. Filmmaking-wise, it has its issues, especially when you get to the fight scenes. Like, I know the scene where Batman says something, you know, "Oh, I can't beat two of your pawns," and then Ra's is like, "So be it," and calls in like 4 more guys. That fight scene was shot horribly. I know I saw online plenty of people reminiscing about getting motion sickness in the movie theater watching a Chris Nolan fight scene in a Batman film. I think by the time he got to Dark Knight Rises, he learned how to shoot a fight and action sequence, but in Batman Begins, they were quite headache-inducing. But other than that, I think it's a good film. It was the first comic book film I saw where I recognized moments out of comics that I had read. You know, I recognized the source material, which was a lot of fun. It also did a lot of things, other than the fact that it's an origin story, which I'm kind of over origin stories at this point. Other than that, I think it did a lot of good things that a comic book film should do. You know, it gave you a lot of action, and I think what's cool about Batman is that his origin includes a lot of action. You know, it's him learning how to fight. It's not like other origin stories where it could be 2-hour film and the first hour and a half is just talking and introducing a bad guy and, oh, how do I use these powers and this and that, then all the action is right at the end. You know, Batman Begins, you have, you know, the movie starts with Batman, well, Bruce Wayne, in like a Chinese prison fighting people because he wants to learn how to fight, how to take on criminals. You know, his training with Ra's al Ghul in the League of Shadows, as they're called in this trilogy of films. It's all him learning how to fight. So when you get to the ending, that's not the only action in the entire film. That's when you finally see Batman as Batman, but you've seen Bruce Wayne doing a lot of fighting throughout the film. What's also fun about the film is that since it's Batman Begins, it's about his, you know, first adventures as Batman. So it's a young Batman who's not too great at being Batman, which is, you don't always get to see. So it's fun when you see those stories because we're mostly used to Batman being prepared for anything. Batman never loses a fight because he's always prepared. With enough prep time, Batman can beat anyone. So it's fun to see a young Batman, because those are also some of my favorite comics, like Batman Year One and The Long Halloween, which has been confirmed as overlapping with Batman's first year as Batman. So you see a very young Batman, which also means that a lot of his more colorful enemies don't exist yet. The Long Halloween very much deals with the mob families, the Falcone family, the Maroni family. You do get a Two-Face origin, which again ties into the Dark Knight. But Batman Begins, like I said, it's fun to see a young Batman. And what I also like that the film does at the end is that I'm pretty sure I've heard Chris Nolan say when he made Batman Begins, he planned on making the one Batman film, that was it. Had no plans for a trilogy or a sequel or anything like that. Just Batman Begins, and that was it. And even though the ending kind of opens up the idea for a sequel, I can see very much how it wasn't meant to set up the sequel. It was very simply just showing that Batman's work is never done. And I liked that idea. I think that's always the best ending of a movie or television show about a character like this. If you're not killing the character off at the end, which obviously you're not going to do in a film called Batman Begins, it's nice to see this idea. Okay, Batman exists. We have Jim Gordon with the bat signal, and he gives Batman the Joker card. And I love that you don't get the title Batman Begins until that point. So it's like up until this point, it was Bruce Wayne just kind of doing a sort of vigilante thing, not really Batman quite yet. And then he saves Gotham City from Ra's al Ghul. Jim Gordon realizes he can use the help, gets the idea of when Carmine Falcone is tied to a floodlight, creates a bat signal on top of Gotham City Police Department. Batman visits him when the signal goes on, hands him the Joker card, the very first Batman villain, Joker, the most iconic Batman villain. And it's like Batman flies off the roof, says his line, oh, you'll never have to thank me, and then flies off the roof. Batman Begins. And the film student in me loves that idea that that's the moment he became Batman. So that's something that I really enjoy about the film. Even though it did set up the sequel, and obviously once people wanted a sequel, you had to use Joker because of that ending. I think Batman Begins could exist on its own as a single Batman film that never got a sequel and would still be one of the best Batman films, one of the best comic book films ever made. But they did create a full trilogy. The sequel to Batman Begins was The Dark Knight. I'm going to start off by saying that I think Heath Ledger gave an incredible performance. The mentality he put himself in and just the things he did to become the character we see on screen is unlike anything I've ever seen another actor do. He became that character we see on screen, and it's such a shame that an actor that great with so much talent died at such a young age. It's such a shame to have seen his career get cut short because he was clearly bound for great things after this, and it's so sad that his career was cut short like that because his performance was just absolutely amazing in this film. Unfortunately, the character he was playing was not the Joker. It looked sort of like the Joker, and he was called the Joker, and he used a Joker card, but it wasn't the Joker. See, for me, what defines the Joker is that he's laughing most of the time because he finds himself hilarious, because he's constantly telling these bad jokes. And I honestly can only remember the Joker laughing twice in the film. And the first time he laughs, it's a sarcastic laugh. So he only does a good Joker laugh once. And I think you need the Joker to be laughing all the time, whether it's like a giggle to an all-out, mouth open wide, eyes tightly shut, tears streaming down his face, cackle. The Joker needs to be laughing and telling bad jokes. The Joker is his own audience, and I didn't get that from Heath Ledger's Joker. Another thing that I think caused problems was that a lot of the writing for the character of the Joker was very inconsistent. At some point in the film, Joker says a line that goes something like, I'm like a dog chasing a car. I wouldn't know what to do when I caught one. He was very much characterized as being chaos personified. That was his thing. He's chaos. He's out of control. You know, just flying by the seat of his pants, making things up as he goes along. And the first 6 minutes of the film prove that that is not the case at all. That this Joker, very much like the Joker in the comics, is very meticulous in how he achieves the things he does. You know, look at that opening scene where he has all the henchmen kill each other, then he kills the last henchman, so this way he doesn't have to share all the money he just robbed. And that's definitely a very Joker move. However, the motivation behind it, I think, is what kind of disappoints me in that portrayal of the Joker, because for me, the most important part of the Joker's personality and existence is his obsession with Batman. Joker can't exist on his own. Joker needs Batman because he's all about Batman. He's obsessed with Batman because Batman created him in most versions of the character. You know, it was Batman who caused him to fall into the vat of chemicals that turned him into the Joker. I know in The Dark Knight he does eventually become obsessed with Batman, but I don't know, something about the portrayal just, it didn't work for me. But there are things in the film that do work, because I think Heath Ledger very much knew what type of character the Joker is. And it seemed like he very much tried to infuse as much of the Joker he thought should exist into the movie. It's just, I think the writing kind of held him back, because he does things that prove he's an expert planner and then keeps going on and on about how he doesn't have a plan. He's just making things up as he goes along. So I think moments like when the Joker starts applauding when Jim Gordon is made commissioner, Heath did that on his own. They were shooting Gary Oldman and Nestor Carbonell shooting their scene, and the mayor says his line, you know, new commissioner Jim Gordon, and Heath Ledger starts clapping. And Chris Nolan sees this like, holy shit, get a camera on this guy. We need to catch him clapping for Jim Gordon, which again is something that I think is important to the Joker, because there's a great episode of the animated series where Joker is mad that he's not invited to a dinner that honors Commissioner Jim Gordon, because in Joker's opinion, if it weren't for people like the Joker who exist, Commissioner Gordon wouldn't have a job. So I think that was very much a Joker thing to do that Heath Ledger did, and like I said, Heath did that on his own. Another thing that's very Joker-ish, in my opinion, is when the Joker walks out of the hospital and he's blowing it up. And there's a part where he makes an explosion noise, like, you know, kind of like a when he hits the detonator. I'm guessing that's something Heath just kind of did on his own. And probably the other most memorable moment the Joker has in the film, other than him clapping, is he walks out of the hospital as everything is blowing up, and on set there was a technical problem. Not all of the explosives went off. So only part of the explosives went off, and that was it. So Heath is just walking, you know, keeps doing what he's supposed to do, but then realizes not everything is exploding. He's supposed to be walking away from an exploding building, and the building isn't exploding. So he kind of looks around and kind of like shrugs his shoulders, like, that's it. I thought there'd be more. He keeps hitting the button on the detonator, and then finally they fixed the problem. The buildings start exploding again. He jumps, you know, startled by the explosion, then gets in the bus and drives away. And again, that was something that Heath did in the moment. They were having a problem on set, and Heath never broke character. This was happening to his character. Again, that's something that I think is very Joker-ish that Heath Ledger did. The things that Heath did on his own, I think were great. The things that were in the script that the Joker would say, I wasn't a fan of. The only thing I did like was how he kept changing his own origin. One version, his dad gave him the scars. Another version, he gave the scars to himself. And I liked that in the script. But for me, the Joker in The Dark Knight was more of just a domestic terrorist. It didn't seem like the over-the-top Joker we've come to expect, or at least I've come to expect. It just felt like a terrorist. Like I said, Heath gave a hell of a performance, but unfortunately, in my opinion, it wasn't the Joker, which frustrates the hell out of me because the only thing anyone ever talks about in The Dark Knight is the Joker. And people that don't read comics think that that's the way the Joker should be. And I remember going back to school the semester after that film came out, and one of my friends who was a huge Batman fan, I was talking to him, and he was like, he was so mad because it wasn't the Joker. Me and him talked a lot about that, how we thought it wasn't the Joker, and that it's unfortunate that that's how people think the Joker has to be. And so I'm really hoping that Jared Leto, or Leto, however you pronounce his last name, I don't know. I'm hoping his Joker is completely different. You know, I'm really looking forward to how he portrays the Joker, because I think if he goes up there and tries to imitate Heath Ledger, he's going to fail. If he goes out there and just does his own Joker thing, you know, I know I just heard that it was described as majestic, which I think can be used to describe the Joker in some ways. I think he's going to, you know, do a great job. But as I was saying, I think it's frustrating that the conversation starts and ends with the Joker when you talk about The Dark Knight, because for me, this is something I realized very recently. Because like I said, I saw The Dark Knight and I liked it, but I thought it could be better. Because like I said, me and my friend were frustrated by the portrayal of the Joker. And it wasn't until a few months ago I was watching The Dark Knight, and since I wasn't, you know, at this point I had already decided Heath Ledger's Joker isn't my Joker. So I was paying less attention to the Joker and more attention to the rest of the film. And I realized that if you watch The Dark Knight, like I said, up until this point, I was very unimpressed with the film as a whole because everyone focused on the Joker. And because everyone else was focusing on the Joker, I was focusing on the Joker. So when I decided not to focus on the Joker, I realized that the film is a lot more impressive if you watch it with the idea that Harvey Dent is the main character. The movie is not about the Joker. The movie is not about Batman. The movie is about Harvey Dent. And I think that completely changes the way I watch the film. One of my friends that I talk to online about The Dark Knight all the time, I said the same thing to him, and it blew his mind to think of it that way. That whether it was Chris Nolan's intention or not, the film is about Harvey Dent. The Joker is background to Harvey Dent's story. You know, Harvey Dent is the hero in this film because we see him go from, you know, the face of justice to becoming Two-Face. And that's something that I think also worked with the Joker, because it proved a point that Joker was trying to make in the film that was borrowed from The Killing Joke, which is that everyone, no matter how sane you think you are, everyone is one bad day away from becoming the Joker. And The Dark Knight did a good job of that. Harvey Dent was a relatively normal guy, and then his fiance dies and half his face is burned off, and he decides, screw it, I'm going to kill a bunch of people now. And I think Harvey Dent's arc makes the film much more exciting and compelling than just waiting for the Joker to appear on screen. And finally, we come to The Dark Knight Rises. It's hard to call this film a Batman film because of the 2 hours and 45 minutes that the film lasts. Batman is in it, I'm gonna guess, no more than 15 minutes. You see plenty of Bruce Wayne, but Batman has 2 scenes. He fights Bane, gets his back broken, and then he fights Bane and saves Gotham City at the end. Obviously, you can tell I think The Dark Knight Rises is by far the worst film in the trilogy. I remember being very excited when it was coming out because I was excited to see Bane. I liked that we were getting a much better version of Bane than we'd gotten the last time we saw Bane, because Bane, in my opinion, is Batman's most dangerous enemy. Because not only is Bane big and strong and able to physically keep up with Batman, he can also mentally keep up with Batman. You know, he's the only character who's ever beaten Batman. And I think that says a lot about this character. It's a shame Bane doesn't get more mainstream recognition for how important he is to the Batman mythology. So I loved seeing Tom Hardy as Bane. I thought he did a great job with the role. I remember sitting in the theater, and it gets to a point where Bruce, at this point, I didn't know it, but he was incorrectly guessing that Bane was the son of Ra's al Ghul. Because the story was that Ra's al Ghul was set to marry some woman, got her pregnant, but then Ra's al Ghul was sent to this prison. But instead of being sent to prison, he was just exiled. What he didn't know was his wife or girlfriend, whoever she was going to take his place in the prison. That she gave birth, and the child grew up in the prison and was the only person to ever escape the prison, which is very much Bane's origin story. He was born in a prison, was raised in a prison, got experimented on with the venom that turned him into Bane, but saying he was the son of Ra's al Ghul, it was probably the only time in a movie theater where I was watching a movie and like made a face in disgust at what they were saying on screen. Bane is the child of Ra's al Ghul? Get the fuck out of here. That's horrible. Then, of course, it turns out that Bane wasn't the child. It was actually Talia al Ghul. I forget her name in the film, but it was her who was the child born in the prison, which didn't help me liking the movie, because then I just thought, well, then you're just taking Bane's origin and mixing it with Talia, and You know, it turned out Bane was in the prison. He helped Talia escape, because then Talia and Ra's al Ghul returned to the prison to save Bane. But I was pretty unimpressed with the rest of the film. After that, it was like that happened, and I was like, oh, fuck this. This is no thank you. But I will say that I do think the ending is pretty cool. You know, the idea that you think Batman died, and I like that, you know, he finally lets Commissioner Gordon know that who he really is. He's Bruce Wayne. And he lets Gordon know that. He doesn't tell him, I'm Bruce Wayne, but he does tell him in a roundabout way. Jim Gordon kind of figures it out for himself. I love that they put up the statue to Batman. I think it's in City Hall, you know, to honor Batman, who saved Gotham by taking the nuke out of Gotham. And so you're thinking, oh, did they really kill off Batman? And, you know, Alfred is really, you know, sad. He's talking to Bruce's grave, saying that he's failed Bruce's parents. And then you see Lucius Fox talking to some Wayne Tech scientists like, is there anything I could have done to fix the autopilot? And they're looking at the system and they're like, the autopilot was fixed. Lucius is like, who fixed it? Like, it was Bruce Wayne who logged in. And you're like, wait, did he survive? And then you see Alfred in, where does he go, Italy or something? And he sees Bruce and Selina sitting at the cafe. Selina wearing the pearls that they say are missing from the Wayne estate when they're reading Bruce Wayne's will. And so I really liked that, just like Alfred's fantasy of seeing Bruce with, you know, another family, he knows that Bruce is alive and has left that Batman lifestyle behind him. And you have all these people online like, oh, it's an elaborate fantasy of Alfred's, or it's, you know, Bruce Wayne's fantasy as he's dying. No, he survived. It's a comic book movie. That's what happens. Heroes survive. Batman survived worse in the comics. He got hit with Darkseid's Omega Beam, got like sent back in time to the caveman times, and fought his way through time to come back to modern day Gotham City. So I think Batman can survive, you know, dragging a nuke out to the middle of the ocean. So I like that. I think it was a cool way to end the series. You get to end Batman's story without killing Batman. Well, you kill Batman, you don't kill Bruce Wayne. Now, talking about the Dark Knight Trilogy, I can't not talk about how dark and gritty these films are, and how once you got Batman Begins, and especially The Dark Knight, everyone wanted all their superheroes to get the dark and gritty treatment. And while that's cool and all, it's kind of a shame that Chris Nolan gets all the credit for that, considering you'd already gotten some serious takes on comic book films, like on comic book characters, before Batman Begins even came out. Batman Begins came out in 2005. You'd already had two very serious X-Men films. You'd already had The Punisher. You'd already had the Blade films, which are R-rated films. Those are pretty serious films. So I think the reason Chris Nolan and this Dark Knight trilogy gets so much credit is because when you look at Batman and Robin compared to Batman Begins, it's a completely different take on Batman. The thing is, Batman lends himself to that. Batman has a very rich history in the comics of being a dark, brooding, serious, and gritty character. So even though people were like, oh, it's dark and gritty for Batman, Batman kind of lends himself to that. Not every comic book hero can be given that treatment and have it be as successful. But it works for Batman because, like I said, there's a history there of being dark and serious. And yes, superheroes also have their bright, colorful, childish, very campy stories, but Batman, just as much as he has that history of being campy, he has an equally prominent, and probably more prominent history of being a dark and brooding character. So overall, it's a trilogy of films that I do enjoy. Like I said, Batman Begins is definitely my favorite of the trilogy, and like I said, is one of my favorite comic book films of all time. But as a huge Batman fan, as you can tell, I'm extremely critical of how Batman is handled when they adapt the character for a live-action film. That just about wraps it up here. If you think my opinions are stupid and wrong, let me know. Facebook.com/WatchingComicsNY or on Twitter @watching_comics. Thanks for listening. I'm Chris Otto, and I'll see you next time.